Hello, North Central Washington. I'm your host, Jenny Rojanasatian, and today I'm excited to introduce you to a teacher with a passion for science and supporting students in STEM education. Stephen Coleman has been a teacher for over 25 years and is currently a science instructor in the Quincy School District. He specializes in designing environmental and sustainable education programs. Stay tuned as I sit down with Stephen in just a few minutes to learn more about his current programs, his projects with students, and more. We'll be right back on air here on the NCW Life channel. And welcome to Networked. I'm your host, Jenny Rojanasatian, on air with Stephen Coleman, Quincy School District. And Steve, though. Steve.
Either works for
Stephen.
me. Yep.
Welcome so much to the show. So excited to have you on air.
Well, thanks. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah. We're going to talk today about your work with students. I know you're really passionate about the programs and projects you are doing right now and that you've done over the years. But I'd love for our community to learn a little bit more about you first. Tell me a little bit about yourself and your background.
Well, I am literally one of the last pioneer kids you'll ever meet. My parents got a farm on the Homestead Act in either 1962 or 3, halfway between Royal and Vantage, and that was home for a good portion of my life. So probably most of my personal interest in terms of stewardship and that kind of thing was learned from my parents, especially my dad. It was always get those stalks in the ground. We're going to stop blowing and erosion, etc. So take care of the land and it'll take care of you.
Wow. So grew up in this region. And then I know you've been teaching for about 25 years.
Yeah, 35 years.
35 years now.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Have you done all that locally as well?
Yeah, I've taught in Quincy exclusively.
Okay. Quincy has an amazing school district and educators and staff. Tell us a little bit about some of the work you've done at Quincy over the years. I mean, I have a list of honors and awards that you as an educator have received, from Sustainable Design, Project Leadership and Support, to Golden Apple, Outstanding Achievement Award, Outstanding Water Education. The list goes on. So you've done a lot of great things out there in Quincy.
Well, thank you. Probably it started, I needed a thesis for my master's program. I have a master's in education, and I was looking around and very interested in outdoor ed. So my thesis was a survey of outdoor education in Washington State. I called probably 25 or 30 different educators and had about a 15, 20 question interview. And it took me an hour and a half because they were so incredibly passionate about what they were doing. And that really got me interested and excited. The problem with a lot of the outdoor education at that time was that all the camps were full and all the camps were expensive. And so that led me to think, okay, what can we do locally? And with that, actually a colleague of mine kicked off a program out at the Quincy Lakes. I was a part of it 1 year, and then she left, and I had real major safety concerns. And so I changed things dramatically, and we ran that for probably 15 years. The critical component is we made sure that students never had unstructured time. So over the course of 2 days with 180 kids, we saw 17 or 18 rattlesnakes. And I've got in excess of 30,000 student hours in the field with no injuries, which probably beats the average playground.
Oh, I'm sure. I'm sure. 180 students, that's no easy feat at any given time. Yeah.
It comes down to pre-planning. So we had 3 groups. We called it up the hill and 3 groups down the hill. We were at Quincy Lake, so the 3 groups down the hill were on the Dusty Lake Trail. And we made sure that absolutely everything was purposeful. So even the rotation between groups, it wasn't like, okay, leave here and run over and find your next teacher. It was everything purposeful. So on the uphill side, the people that were gathering up garbage would deliver a group to, I don't remember what the other ones were. We did tree planting 1 year. We've done so many different activities. They did compass and GPS. They did intro to fishing. I mean, there were so many different things that were done that I can't remember the exact rotations. But all of the movement was purposeful. And then down the hill was exactly the same thing. We had kids sketching with cross-age tutors. They were sketching native plants and rock formations, which is fantastic when you've got those basalt columns and things. We did looking for evidence of animals and wildlife, and then we categorize them as positive, negative, and neutral. And the kids are going, well, here's people, that's negative. This is negative. Why is that negative? And the bottom line is that if we use it wisely and take care of it, that's how we develop stewardship. If you don't know it's there, you think there's nothing there, but in reality, there's a lot. We talk about how slowly the area recovers. So probably, 15 years, so probably about 1995, and I'm guessing on that timeline, but it was an extended period of time. St. Helens blew up in 1980, and there was a badger hole, and it had Mount St. Helens ash in it, and it was still there. And so we'd show the kids, year after year, this is how slow things change out here. So it's a matter of wise use, and that was kind of the core.
When at what age do you start introducing things like environmental stewardship to youth?
I was teaching 6th grade at the time, but I've taken younger kids as well, and you can introduce it at any age. Younger kids honestly have great curiosity. In today's world, we find older kids sometimes are kind of getting stuck in games and cell phones and those sorts of things, and it's hard sometimes to spark an interest. So I think the sooner the better.
Bring them outside.
Bring them outside and get them asking questions. I think that's the key.
Now, speaking of ages of students, I'd love to talk a little bit about where you are right now. So you're at the Quincy Innovation Academy, which is a big picture learning school. Let's dive into what is Quincy Innovation Academy? What grades are there? And
there's actually 2 programs. The big picture program is grades 6 through 12.
Okay.
So a real small school, not a lot of students there. It's a school of choice, and we've really gotten some good students in the last several years, and so I'm seeing a real positive uptick. There's also a online school there as well, so students come in, they're required, 25, 30 hours a week, something like that, but they can obviously come in and get help if they need it on anything they're doing. So it's 2 schools in 1 building, technically.
Yeah. And about how many students are you working with there at the... Are you working with all grade bands from 6 to 12?
I'm working 6-12, and like I said, it's very small, and I don't know the exact number, and we're so early in the year, but it's probably about
That's
30.
right. School just got started.
Yeah, we just got started.
Yes.
So there's probably about 35.
Okay. So, students, yeah. And I know we're at the start of the year. We're going to talk more about some specific programs, but what are you most excited about with when a new school year starts?
Well, I'm totally stoked because this program is building, and I'm excited about it, and the people that I talk to are excited about it, and that's a big deal. The kids are excited about it, so they're wanting to go. They want to know when we're going, and so I've got 18 field dates set up for the floodplain restoration project, and then we hope to throw a couple on in the winter as well if we get some deep snow to go out and look at animal tracks and snowshoes. So we try to throw some fun in there, but obviously there's a lot of education happening.
Yeah. And this is the first school year back with COVID, kind of subsided. Kids are fully able to come into school without masks. I mean, last year you were still teaching in a masked environment.
Yep. I'm glad to be done with masks.
Yeah. Well, Stephen, there's so much to dive into, but we do have to head to a commercial break, so don't go too far. Welcome back to Networked. We've been on air with Steve Coleman from the Quincy School District. He's a science educator. We talked about your background, programs, a little bit about Quincy Innovation Academy, and the students there, 6th grade through 12th, in person, online, kind of really meeting students where they are as far as their needs
That's exactly
and learning.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
So ultimately, an alternative school by definition, if you're not doing something different, there's probably no reason to exist. So we're looking at different ways of doing things, trying to meet the needs of students who weren't successful for whatever reason, or simply chose, hey, I like what you're doing, I want to go to school there.
Yeah, I want to do something different. How long is the Quincy Innovation Academy? Just a couple years now, correct?
Yeah, we changed formats for alternative school, and so we're maybe 3 years old.
3 years into it.
A little confusing with COVID.
Yeah, I know. We were just talking about as we were wrapping up. Such a hard for our educators and students the last couple of years, and obviously the last school year we were still in COVID and still dealing with a lot of obviously safety regulation. But Now you've got a new school year, a lot of optimism.
Yeah, lots of it. I think everybody's ready to get it in gear and move on.
Yeah. Well, let's talk more about environmental stewardship. I know that you're really passionate about that, and you've got a project you're working on with students, which kind of ties into other environmental work that's happening in the community. So this is a very tangible, real life scenario. Let's dive into that. Tell me a little bit about that project.
Well, probably the most interesting is right here locally, and it's the last remaining intact floodplain in the lower Wenatchee River up by Sunny Slope. And the Cascade Fisheries Enhancement Group is doing a salmon habitat restoration project. We got in on the ground floor of that, which is really interesting. Apparently that area was cleaned off maybe close to 100 years ago, and there was either a farm or a dairy. And so now when we get high water events, there's erosion and that sort of thing, and that's what they're working to mitigate. So the fisheries biologists have been fencing off portions every year. They install temporary irrigation, and then they replant native plants, trees, shrubs, forbs, etc. Leave the irrigation and fence up for about 3 years so the deer and things don't decimate them in the wintertime. And then once they have deeply established roots and they're strong enough, hardy enough plants, and those things come out and they move on and do another parcel. So our students have been given a parcel of ground literally parallel to where the biologists are working, and they're going to do the exact same kind of work, but we're going to do it independently. Okay. We'll get technical assistance as needed, but then the students themselves will do the actual work. Okay. And that, to me, is the real excitement. You're working as a biologist. And I mean, we do that for several reasons. One of them is a lot of today's students don't have a clue of jobs that they can do right here in our local community outside of agriculture. Now, we need the agricultural jobs done. But years ago, I had a particular student who was postponing graduation, which is a nice way of saying he was purposely failing classes so that he could graduate as late as he possibly could. And I had a conversation with him, and he says, I don't want to graduate. And I said, you're not going to graduate? Because, yeah, but not till I'm 20. Well, why do you not want to graduate? Well, because I have to go to work. What's wrong with going to work? Well, it's hot out there. Yeah. What do you mean it's hot out there? In the fields, man, it's really hot. And I said, yeah, but who said you have to work in the fields? And he looked at me and he said, I'm Mexican. It's what we do. And it bothered me that he felt that was his only option. That it's honorable work. We need it done. I respect the people that did it. I was on the farm 6 years out of high school before I went to college. 95 to 100 hours a week was not uncommon, and it's brutal. But I want my students to say, here's where I choose to work. If you think about it, more than half of our awake hours as an adult are at work. So if you can find something that pays the bills that you enjoy doing, then you've won. So I want my students to see every opportunity out there. I want to expose them to things they haven't seen. I want to get them doing things they've never done before, and then I can build on that. So if a student takes a project like this, works on planting trees, shrubs, etc., comes back and watches them, sees them grow, measures them, monitors, follows that whole process, it is something he's probably never dreamed of or thought about before. And I want to take that and then come back and talk about, okay, here's something that you've done and you were successful at. You worked at it. It required labor. It required effort. It required persistence. And develop that sense of pride and accomplishment, because those are the things that fuel us to try other things that we deem as scary.
Well, I'm so moved by that story. I think all of us just want our youth and communities to have unlimited options and possibilities and to be shown those pathways. What I especially love about what the work you're doing locally is, and relating that to careers right here, because so often too, our youth don't see the career potential in our community. They feel like they have to move away, especially in STEM fields. And there's such a rich science base right here in our community.
Well, that's exactly right. One of the projects we're also doing in addition to planting trees and shrubs, we're going to put together a 4-season guidebook of that particular area of plants and animals that are local. So we put together a No Child Left Inside grant, and we're funded. And among other things, I picked up 5 digital cameras. So kids are doing photography. Kids are also doing sketches. Those things will go into the guidebooks. Ultimately, when that's done, people who go visit the site will pull into the parking lot On the sign, there will be a QR code. Grab your smartphone, download the local guidebook, and you're good to go. So, I mean, that is all phases of a STEM or STEAM education, science, technology, engineering, art, and math, in order to go take the pictures, do the sketches, put together a book. It's all electronic format. It's not going to be published in terms of on paper. So it's actually a pretty real life type of application that's new and different and should be a lot of fun.
And the applied learning, like what you're talking about, is very tangible projects that will then be used by the community. I mean,
absolutely.
The development you're doing on the land as far as getting that back to where it should be, right? The restoration work is something they're going to be able to come back 10 years from now and see that they did that.
Well, that's exactly right. When we were working down at the Quincy Lakes in the early years, we were able to plant some of the native species down there. And I've heard kids come back and say, we planted that tree.
Right.
And I don't know if they planted that one or the one over here. I mean, it's kind of irrelevant.
Yeah.
But there was a sense of ownership. We also had put in a sign way back in the day that it's gone now. And it just said, please help us keep the Quincy Wildlife Area clean. And it was in English and Spanish. And one fall when school started, kids came running into me, my previous students, Mr. Coleman, they took down our sign. It's gone. They burned our sign. Well, there was a sense of ownership. I made the sign. I set up the sign, but they were out there working and they had taken ownership in that. So there's this awareness and sense of pride and ownership and stewardship. And that's really a huge chunk of what I want to see developed among, obviously, all the academics.
Well, and, you know, your passion shines through, too, for getting kids out of the classroom and into these outdoor learning environments. I imagine there's a lot of challenges with that as an educator. There's transportation, there's cost. It's not just an easy thing. An educator can't take the kids outside, out into the lakes or the wildlife every day. Obviously, there's a lot of layers.
There's a lot of layers that requires a lot of planning, and you have to be able to answer the questions and know the questions that are going to be asked when you go to an administrator and say, yeah, here's my solution. Right. Well, what about this? Well, we're going to do that. And so it seems a little bit contrary, but when somebody disagrees with me, I don't find that to be frustrating. I honestly welcome it, or if they ask me challenging questions, because it causes me to rethink and think deeper. And if there's something I missed, I want to catch it. Yeah. The reason I have 30,000 hours in the field accident-free is because it was well planned, but that wasn't just me. It was help of colleagues that are asking questions and so forth. Funding is a huge thing, but our district, we're able to take Suburbans. I'm certified to drive. I want a small group of kids anyway, so I take multiple trips, and that saves us a bunch of money. But it's much easier to work with a small handful of kids than it is to organize 30.
Right.
That just becomes a whole different task. So the fact that I'm working in a small school makes it easier. It could be done at a large school, there's no question. It just would require some different types of planning.
Right, and logistics. Now, you talked about funding. Let's talk a little bit about the grant funding you've received, because you talked about the No Child Left Inside.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, what are some of the things that you've seen in terms of getting that funding and, you know, the impact on kids who've gotten outside for maybe the first time really spending out?
We literally did have one student that went up to the floodplain restoration, and he got out of the parking lot and he goes, I don't even know why I came. I don't really like to be outside. Yeah. So we took off and we spent about 6 hours with Jen Herdman, who works at Fisheries, Cascade Fisheries. And we got back to the parking lot and we're getting ready to head home, but we always ask debriefing questions. What went well? What do we need to do different? What do we need to plan for? What do you think? And we're busy asking questions, and this kid's just popping off answers. And nobody else had a chance to say anything. And I kind of looked at him and waited for a minute. And I said, aren't you the one that likes to be inside? And he gave me this great big grin and he goes, well, yeah, I did say that, but I've never been out here before, and this is really cool. Yeah. So there's pay dirt. I mean, that's exactly what we're after. Yesterday I was talking with students. I had a PowerPoint showing them different options, because I would like everybody to go try something before they tell me they're not interested. Get out there, look, experience it. Then if you don't like it, at least you can make an informed decision. And so, can I use you for an example? And he says, sure, with a grin, knowing I'm not going to throw him under the bus.
Right.
So I retold the story yesterday, and I said, so do you want to go out this year? And he looks at me and he goes, I sure hope so. So that's what we're looking for. It's excitement.
Yeah. And that just opportunity to see the world in a different way, even if he's not going to become a wildlife biologist.
Well, there's so many things to do. So I've got kids doing photography. I've got kids doing sketching. We're going to monitor our planting press in addition to the original plantings for growth and survival rates of all of the different types of species that were planted. So there's a lot of data in there. Applied mathematics are in there. Yesterday, we were funded by Microsoft for $3,000 to put together some custom computers so that we can run Adobe with Photoshop and Lightroom so we can edit our own photography and our own videos.
Congratulations.
So, yeah, thanks. I'm pumped. It was super supportive and I appreciate it.
Yeah.
But there's so many different things, and the only limit is really the imagination. What do you want to do? What are you interested to do? Which is totally part of a big picture philosophy. But then you look at, okay, how do I tie all these other things into it so they all integrate? And that's really the way people work in the real world. The only time we do subject area individually is called school. And other than that, you know, we don't do math to do math. We do math to answer a question. And then we communicate the answer using language, and everything ties together. And I don't think a lot of our students see all the connections. They see them as fragmented. So this is a totally different way of teaching, a different way of learning, but you have to have something to anchor. And I think this gives them the anchor.
Well, you know, what came to mind as you were saying this is we're really passionate at the Tech Alliance about STEM education or STEAM. And you've been mentioning those, the definition of that: science, technology, engineering, math, STEAM learning. So many times people say, well, isn't this always taught? Right? Science and math have been taught for years.
Sure.
But like you said, it's the integration into real projects, right?
Well,
that they can apply outside. It's not just open your science book for 1 hour and close it, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. My daughter and I both graduated 5th in our class. The major difference was, and this is kind of embarrassing, she was 5th from the top and I was 5th from the bottom.
Okay.
And my class was very small. I'm going to just throw that out there, graduating class of 43. But I never saw why or how I was going to use any of it. When I took algebra in high school, I said, when am I going to use this? And my teacher said, oh, I use algebra a lot to buy a loaf of bread. And I thought, you idiot. You know, I don't need algebra to buy a loaf of bread. Yeah. And so when I started teaching, I want to give kids a reason of why this is important. So there's two major philosophies in education, and oftentimes we teach people something just in case they might need it. Well, with this project, we teach them just in time to use it. And that mental shift gives value to what it is that they're learning. I need to pay attention to this because I'm going to be asked to do it.
Right.
And this is what I need to solve my problem. So, I mean, it's just a different motivation.
Right. Well, Steve, thank you so much for coming on air with today. I have really enjoyed hearing your story and the incredible work you're doing. I would love to invite you and a couple students on air this spring. We should bring them on air to talk about the work that they have been doing on the floodplain.
I've enjoyed it.
Yeah.
It's something I get easily excited about, and I think I got a couple students, and one of them might be the kid who didn't like to go outside.
Awesome. I would love to have you back on to do that this spring.
Well, thank you.
Awesome. Thanks so much. We're going to one last commercial break. I'll be right back here on the NCWF channel.
Since 1999, NCW Tech Alliance has served as our regional hub for technology innovation. As a 501c3, their nonprofit mission is to connect people and technology resources to create a thriving community. You can network with the team and guests from today's show by visiting them at www.ncwtech.org.